I used to believe that love was enough. That if you smiled enough, cooked the right dinners, and said all the right things, everything else would eventually fall into place. But that's not how life works. And that's not how marriages die. They die quietly, piece by piece, while you're still pretending to be happy. My name is Victoria, and for 13 years, I was married to Josh, a man who loved me more than I probably deserved. The kind of man who built me a life, literally, with his bare hands. And somehow, I destroyed it. The day we moved into our dream house should have been the happiest of my life. It was everything I said I wanted. The perfect kitchen, the wide porch, the backyard where our kids, Noah and Lily, could play until the sun went down. Josh had spent 10 years making it real. Every nail, every brick, every late-night sketch was because of me. He thought he was building our future, but the truth is, I had already started leaving him long before the last wall went up. When he walked through that front door, covered in sawdust, grinning like a boy who'd just won a trophy, I smiled back. I had to, because I knew what was sitting inside the manila envelope hidden in my purse. He looked at me with such pride, such hope, and said, "We did it." And all I could think was, "No, Josh, you did." I just stood here watching. For weeks, maybe months, I'd rehearsed that moment in my head. How I'd tell him. How I'd keep it clean and mature. But when I finally handed him that envelope, the one with divorce papers, my hands were shaking so badly that the edges cut my skin. He laughed at first. God, I still remember that laugh. The way he thought it was a joke. The confusion on his face when he realized I wasn't kidding. I told myself I was doing the right thing. That I deserved more than what I had. That love shouldn't feel like loneliness in a house full of people. I told myself that David, the man I'd been seeing in secret, understood me in ways Josh never did. David made me feel seen, or at least that's what I convinced myself to believe. He was older, polished, confident, a family lawyer who always seemed in control. And when he said he could help me start over, it sounded like freedom. Josh didn't scream that day. He didn't throw anything. He just looked at me. That hurt more than if he'd yelled. His silence made me feel like I'd just stabbed something good and watched it bleed out. I left with the kids that night. Told them we were spending the weekend at Aunt Claire's. They didn't understand, of course. Lily asked if Daddy was coming too, and I couldn't even look her in the eye when I said no. I spent that weekend with David. He told me I was brave, that I'd made the right choice. But when I lay awake that night, staring at the ceiling of his expensive apartment, all I felt was hollow. Still, I buried that feeling deep down, because what was the alternative? Admit I'd made a mistake? I couldn't. Not yet. When I came back Monday, Josh was gone to work. The house looked too clean, too silent. Divorce papers sat on the counter now. He'd signed them. No calls. No fights. Just silence. It should have felt like victory. It felt like standing in the ashes of something I'd burned myself. Weeks passed. David started coming around more, smiling, confident, holding my hand like I was a prize he'd won. He handled all the legal filings, assured me he'd take care of everything. He even joked once, "Don't worry, babe. I've never lost a case." I smiled, pretending to believe that was comforting. But Josh wasn't stupid. I knew that look in his eyes when we met for the custody discussions, that quiet, dangerous calm. He wasn't going to go down easy. Especially not with his father, Edward, who'd been a family lawyer for 40 years, sitting beside him. Edward scared me. He was too calm, too sharp. The kind of man who could tear your world apart with a single sentence. And when I noticed the faint smirk on his face during the first mediation meeting, I realized they were planning something. I just didn't know it yet. David brushed it off when I told him. "They're bluffing," he said. "Standard intimidation tactics. Don't worry about it." So I didn't, or tried not to. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. Edward's eyes lingered on David a little too long every time he spoke, like he was sizing him up. And Josh, he didn't look broken anymore. He looked patient, like a man waiting for his moment. Still, I told myself we'd win. David had handled dozens of divorces. He knew how to make things look clean. He promised me the house, primary custody, support. He said Josh didn't stand a chance. And I believed him because I needed to. Because admitting doubt meant admitting guilt. I convinced myself that I was the victim, that I was just a woman who'd fallen out of love and found something new. But every night when I watched Noah and Lily sleep, a part of me knew I wasn't escaping pain. I was passing it on. I told myself I'd make it up to them someday. Someday, when all of this was over. But someday never comes for people like me. And I had no idea then the trap I was walking into. When you're doing something wrong, there's always that small voice in your head that whispers, "This will come back to you." I heard that voice every single night, and every single morning, I found new ways to ignore it. But by the time I started listening, it was already too late. The first mediation meeting was at a downtown law office. All glass and polished wood, the kind of place that made you feel small, even before you sat down. David walked beside me, confident, carrying that same sleek black folder he always did. He was wearing a charcoal suit and his "Don't worry, I've got this" smile. I used to find that reassuring. That day, it just made me anxious. Across the table sat Josh and his father, Edward. Edward was the kind of man who didn't need to raise his voice to make you nervous. His eyes did the work for him, cold, intelligent, steady. Josh didn't look at me at first. He sat quietly, fingers interlaced, the same hands that had built me a home I'd now turned into a battlefield. David started the conversation with that professional tone I'd come to know too well, polite, confident, rehearsed. He said words like custody, settlement, marital assets, like they were pieces of a game, and we were simply playing it better. When he leaned back, smiling, and said, "We'll make this simple. Victoria keeps the house and primary custody of the children." I almost smiled too, until I saw Edward's expression. He didn't flinch, didn't argue. He just reached into his briefcase, pulled out a folder, and placed it on the table. "Interesting," he said softly, voice smooth as silk. "Considering the land and the construction permits were all purchased under my son's name long before your client met him." My stomach dropped. David blinked, confused for the first time since I'd met him. "Excuse me?" Edward opened the file, sliding a set of documents toward him. "These are the property deeds," he said calmly. "Registered to Josh, paid in full. The land predates the marriage, therefore it's non-marital property. Meaning, legally speaking." He turned his gaze to me, steady and sharp. "You have no claim to the house, Mrs. Turner." It felt like all the air had been sucked out of the room. David's jaw tightened, but he forced a smirk. "We can dispute that," he said. Edward smiled faintly. "Of course. You could also dispute gravity, but I assure you, the outcome will be similar." Josh still hadn't spoken. He just sat there, watching me. Not angry, not smug, just done. And that was worse than any shouting match could have been. David flipped through the papers, frowning, then muttered, "We'll need time to verify these." Edward nodded politely. "Take all the time you need. Oh, and while you do..." He reached into his case again and pulled out another stack of papers, this time photographs and bank statements. When he spread them out on the table, my world stopped. Credit card statements, hotel charges, receipts, timestamps that lined up with nights I told Josh I was at Claire's. Pictures. One of me and David standing too close outside a restaurant. Another at his condo parking lot. I couldn't breathe. I turned toward David, expecting him to have some explanation, some plan, but for the first time, he looked pale. Edward's voice was calm, deliberate. "You were careless," he said, "leaving your children with babysitters while you spent nights with your lawyer." My hands trembled. David opened his mouth, but Edward cut him off. "Oh, and Mr. Whitmore," he said smoothly, addressing him directly, "you might want to prepare an explanation for the Bar Association when they receive this file. You do know they take a dim view of lawyers sleeping with their clients while managing their divorces, yes?" David froze. His fingers tightened around his pen. "You can't." "I can," Edward interrupted. "And I will if you try to push this any further." The silence in that room was unbearable. I could hear my own heartbeat. Josh finally spoke then, quietly. "Was it worth it, Victoria?" I wanted to say something, anything, but the words wouldn't come. I just stared down at the table, my tears blurring the papers that would soon erase everything I thought I'd win. David closed his folder, jaw tight, and muttered, "We'll discuss this privately." But it was already over. He knew it. I knew it. And Edward knew it most of all. When we left that office, David didn't speak for the first few minutes. Then, when we got into his car, he snapped, "Why didn't you tell me he had that deed?" "I didn't know." I cried. He slammed his hand on the steering wheel. "You should've. You said everything was joint property." "I thought it was." He cursed under his breath, muttering something about "this isn't good," and he's going to file ethics charges. That's when it hit me. He wasn't worried about me. He was worried about himself. Over the next few days, things unraveled fast. David stopped answering my calls. He said he was handling it, but I could feel the distance, the coldness creeping in. It was the same tone Josh had started using before our marriage fell apart. Distant, detached, tired. I'd left one man for another who was exactly the same, only colder. When the final mediation came, it was quick. David showed up late, barely looking at me. Edward presented the evidence, methodically, mercilessly. David didn't argue this time. He just nodded, deflated. The new agreement was simple. Josh got full custody. The house remained his. I got visitation rights, limited, supervised. And no spousal support. By the time it ended, David had vanished from my life. His calls stopped. His texts stopped. And when I went by his office, the receptionist said he'd taken some time off. Later, I found out why. Edward had actually followed through with his complaint. David was under investigation. I should have been angry at Edward for ruining him. But deep down, I knew David had ruined himself. And I'd let him take me down with him. Josh never gloated. He didn't need to. When I saw him leaving that office with Noah and Lily holding their hands, I realized that everything I'd wanted, stability, safety, love, was right there all along. I'd traded it for something that never existed. That night, I sat alone in my apartment, surrounded by boxes I hadn't unpacked, staring at my reflection in the dark window. I didn't recognize the woman looking back. She had David's perfume on her neck, Josh's pain in her eyes, and nothing left to show for it. For days, I couldn't even bring myself to call the kids. What would I say? Mommy made a mistake. They wouldn't understand. And if they did, they'd never forgive me. It wasn't until a week later that I finally saw them again, a brief, supervised visit at a community center. They looked different, happier, lighter. Lily ran to hug me, but even that felt distant, like something between us had quietly broken. Noah just nodded. When I tried to ask about school, he mumbled something and looked at the floor. And when the hour ended, neither of them wanted to leave Josh's side. That's when I finally understood the depth of what I'd done. I hadn't just lost my husband. I'd lost my family because of my choices, my lies, my selfishness disguised as freedom. When I went home that night, the silence was unbearable. The same silence I once hated in my marriage was now my only companion. Except now, it wasn't peaceful. It was punishment. And for the first time in years, I cried until morning. Not for losing Josh, but for realizing I'd never really seen what I had until it was gone. 6 months. That's how long it took for silence to stop feeling strange and start feeling permanent. I'd spent those months drifting between denial and regret, hoping maybe time would soften what I'd done. That maybe one morning, I'd wake up and somehow, everything would just reset. But life doesn't hand you forgiveness just because you start missing what you destroyed. I still remember the Sunday afternoon I went back to the house, the one I used to call ours. The air was heavy, thick with the scent of rain-soaked earth. I stood outside the front door for nearly 5 minutes, rehearsing what I would say. Every word felt useless. Still, I rang the bell. The door opened and there he was.
Josh.
He looked different, calmer, steadier. There was something in his eyes I hadn't seen in years. Peace. Behind him, I could hear Noah's laughter echoing through the hallway and Lily's little voice asking if the pancakes were ready. For a moment, I almost forgot why I was there. It felt like stepping into a memory I no longer belonged to. "Hi," I whispered. He didn't move, didn't smile, just crossed his arms and said, "What do you want, Victoria?" I hesitated. "Can I come in?" "Just for a minute." He looked over his shoulder at the kids, then back at me. "What for?" I swallowed hard.
To talk.
"About us, about the kids." He exhaled sharply, shaking his head. "There is no us, Victoria. You made sure of that." His tone wasn't angry. That almost made it worse. Anger meant he still cared. Indifference meant I was just another closed chapter in his life. "Please," I said, tears already burning in my eyes. "It's not what you think. Things didn't work out with David, and I—" He cut me off before I could finish. "I don't care what happened with him. You didn't just break my trust, Victoria. You used our kids as a bridge to walk out of our life." I froze. There was no defense. He was right. Every time I thought about those weeks, how easily I'd chosen David's attention over my family, I felt sick. "Josh, I made mistakes," I whispered. "I wasn't myself. He raised his hand, stopping me cold. "You were yourself. You just didn't like what you had. And now that it's gone, you want it back." Before I could reply, a small voice came from behind him. "Dad, who is it?" It was Lily. Her hair was longer now, falling past her shoulders. When she saw me, she hesitated. "Mom?" Josh didn't say anything. I knelt down, forcing a smile through my trembling lips. "Hi, sweetheart." She took a step forward, but stopped when Noah appeared beside her. He didn't say a word, just looked at me, that cautious, uncertain look only a child betrayed by their parent can give. I reached out, but Noah's hand instinctively went to Josh's arm. That tiny gesture broke me. Can we talk?" I asked softly, looking at the kids. "Maybe just the three of us?" Lily's voice wavered. "We don't need to, Mom. We're fine here." Her words were soft, but final. Josh's eyes stayed on me, steady and unreadable. "You should go, Victoria." My throat closed. "I just wanted to see them," I whispered, but he didn't move. "They're seeing you right now," he said quietly. "And it's confusing them. Don't make this harder than it already is." I nodded slowly, blinking back tears. I wanted to say something, anything that would make him understand I wasn't trying to destroy everything. But how do you explain betrayal to the person you betrayed? As I turned to leave, Lily whispered, "Bye, Mom." It wasn't bitter, just distant. That hurt more than anger ever could. I walked back to my car in silence, the sound of their laughter fading behind me. It was the sound of a world I no longer belonged to. 2 years later, I wish I could tell you that I moved on, that I found peace, or someone new, or that I learned to forgive myself. But the truth? I didn't. Some nights, I still wake up expecting to hear Noah running through the hallway or Lily's sleepy voice asking for water. And every time I realize they're not there, it feels like losing them all over again. I moved into a small apartment across town. It's quiet, painfully so. No family pictures. No children's laughter. Just a few potted plants I keep forgetting to water, and a box of toys I can't bring myself to throw away. I still see the kids occasionally, supervised visits as per the agreement. But it's not the same. Noah barely speaks, though he's polite. Lily hugs me, but it feels like she's comforting me, not the other way around. Josh always stays nearby during those visits, sitting quietly, giving us space but never leaving the room. He never looks at me for long, but when he does, I see something that hurts more than hatred, pity. He's doing well now. His construction business took off. I heard through a mutual friend that he's become the guy who built his dream house and survived the divorce of the decade. They say he's stronger now.
Happier.
And I believe it. I drove by the house once late at night just to see it. The lights were on, the porch filled with flower pots Lily must have painted. For a few minutes, I sat there, watching shadows move behind the curtains, their silhouettes laughing, playing, living. I thought about knocking. I didn't, because that house doesn't belong to me anymore. It never really did. Josh built it for us, But I was too busy dreaming of someone else's life to notice that he was already giving me everything I needed. I still think about David sometimes, not with love, but with disbelief. He lost his license, last I heard. Moved to another state. Sometimes I wonder if he ever thinks about me, or if I was just another client who made his life inconvenient. I'll never know. And maybe I don't want to. Edward, Josh's father, sent me a letter once, surprisingly polite. He didn't gloat. He just wrote one line that I've never forgotten. Some people build homes. Others burn them down, and wonder why they're cold. That line has lived in my head ever since. I started therapy, eventually. My therapist says guilt is just love twisted into the wrong shape, that the fact I still feel this much pain means I still care. But caring doesn't fix what's broken. Sometimes, it just makes you realize how deep the cracks go. 5 years later. The kids are older now. Noah just turned 15. Lily's 12. They live full lives with Josh, vacations, friends, school events. He sends me updates sometimes, short messages like, Noah won his robotics competition. Lily's painting won first place. I always reply with the same thing. Tell them I'm proud. And every time I hit send, I stare at the phone a little too long, knowing that's all I'll ever get, small glimpses into the life I once had. The last time I saw them both was on Lily's birthday. Josh invited me to her art showcase, said it might be good for her if I came. I stood at the back of the room, watching as she unveiled a painting of a house surrounded by trees and sunlight. It was our old house. After the applause, she came over, smiling nervously. Do you like it? She asked. It's beautiful, I said, holding back tears. Just like you. She nodded. I painted it because Dad said homes are where you feel safe. So, that's what I painted. Then she hugged me quickly before running back to her friends. I stood there for a long time, staring at that painting, the home I lost, the peace they found. And I finally understood something I hadn't before. Josh didn't take anything from me. He just stopped letting me take from him. When I got home that night, I pulled out an old photo, the one of us standing in front of the half-built house years ago. I used to think that was the day my dream began. Now I know it was the day his did. And even though I'll never be part of that dream again, I'm grateful that at least one of us got to live it. Because sometimes the only redemption you get is knowing that the people you hurt finally found happiness, even if it's without you.